Hello and welcome to the Void Collector devlog series. This is a speedrunning and movement-focused game where you press 1 through 5 on the keyboard to toggle each finger on and off to make various weapons. I've also started work on the second of 3 main stages in the demo, currently called 3 Buildings. It is a decently large and decently challenging stage, and will likely end up being the final stage of the demo. It's got a new interactable element with placeholder sprites called a super launcher, and that name is no joke. Even just bumping into it will send you flying pretty far. What makes them so powerful is that the speed they offer is additive. So if you were to, say, do a gravity dash and a rock-on dash into one of these launchers... Anyways, here's a quick run through what the level's looking like so far. Let's take on this building first. Have to deal with a cuboid on a narrow platform, which can be a bit tricky. Then you have a room where you're ambushed by 2 bouncers and 2 cuboids. Once that floor is cleared out, then we head on up to the second floor. We have another arrangement of 2. This floor is similar, putting up a bunch of walls everywhere that can make it difficult to avoid the bouncers and get close to the cuboids. And to conclude this building, you make your way up to the roof, where you have to deal with yet again another assault of cuboids and bouncers. You might have noticed that this building was full of nothing but bouncers and cuboids, missing any of the other enemies. This was an experiment on my end to see how far I could push level design with just 2 enemies. And it was okay. It's more fun having more enemies to deal with in the ways that they can synergize together, so having this sort of limited enemy approach is likely not something I'm going to be leaning into too much in the future. Now that we're up here, we can see the second of main buildings, the Slapmo Coliseum. You can even reach your way over there with relative ease. It's a cramped, multi-level little structure where you're getting chased down by Slapmos at every turn. It's very much a work in progress since I need to continue to refine how the enemy AI works, but I think it's a cool concept. There are 2 super launchers at the top of either side of the Coliseum. These can be used to skip right on over to the final building, the Steve Strike Sniper Tower. Alternatively, you can go through this little platforming gauntlet while getting shot at by Gunthers and Steve Strike sniping from up top. This section right here is a personal favorite of mine. Sliding in and out while running up the slope and dealing with gunfire is a lot of fun. And once you've made it up to the very top, and if you want to go here first, we've got yet another super launcher that you can use to traverse quite a great distance. I hope you're starting to see what makes this level tick. It's wide, it's open, there's a lot of changes in elevation, and there's no real correct way to do it. You can use the elevation of the first building to skip to the other 2, and use the super launchers on them to skip to the other 2. You can go about it in any real order you want, and then the end of the stage will be right here in the middle. This week has been an experimental one for visuals and level design. Here is the first stage I've been working on, with some trial textures and a new outline shader. The slightly crunchy lines that everything has, and the low-poly environments make it kind of look like a licensed PS2 game, and I dig it. I'm going to look into making the outlines only apply on level meshes, because I feel like they look a little strange on the enemies, and also on the particles. Another note is that there isn't actually any lighting in this environment. I just manually selected certain faces, and gave them a darker version of a texture. It keeps that flat, crunchy look, while still having a bit of depth. If I have any 3D artists watching this, I am very open to suggestion about how to refine it. I've also been working on a refined enemy AI. Previously, this guy, Slapmo, would only be able to run directly at the player, but now, he can navigate over small hazards. I considered letting him jump over pits, but when you're getting swarmed by enemies, I feel like the last thing you need is another way for them to be able to approach you. Now, they definitely need some tweaks. They can see the player from pretty much anywhere, they love getting stuck on ledges, and also get stuck on random slopes for some reason. Some of that needs fixing, but maybe an enemy that can pursue you at all times would be a pretty fun idea. The game's other melee enemy, the Bouncer, will not be receiving the same AI upgrades that Slapmo did. And this might be a very stupid reason, but I prefer the idea that his brain is literally as complicated as see player and run at player. I've made the dangerous realization that if something is conceptually funny to me, I will implement it, even if it's at the expense of the player. Maybe especially if it's at the expense of the player. I've got some tutorial stages in the works, including this one for movement, with some very placeholder textures that'll go over the basics of each type of movement. And then this one features these new little dummy enemies to showcase the functions of each of the different weapons. I feel like I've said this on most of the devlogs at this point, but the weapon switching system is very input demanding. So to help with that, I'd like to introduce a new quality of life feature that will simultaneously make weapon swapping easier for new players, while heightening the skill ceiling for good players. First, you make your hand pose, press Q to save it, and then switch to anything else, and press E to load it. For new players, this means you can reliably always return to at least one weapon. In a pinch, you can always say return to the classic. If you're panicking and have lost track of your current hand state, then you can press E to simply return to something reliable. This can allow for even more input complexity when you really get a hang of it. And the best part of the solution is that it plays even further into the hand-switching gimmick. What you decide to save will come down a lot to player preference. Maybe you'll save the Dragon Killer's Punch, that way you'll always have a reliable bit of upward momentum in case you slip off. Maybe you'll set the Double Barrel, so you can always reliably switch to a source of good damage. Maybe you want to go fast, and set it to the bird so you can have on-demand invincibility and a constant speed boost. There's a lot of cool ways you can use this mechanic, and I feel like it slots into the other ones pretty naturally. There is still a bit of an issue with this system. It only works if the buttons feel comfortable to use, so I've added in an options menu with fully rebindable controls. Well, more accurately, I spent several hours trying to make a rebinding system, and then gave up and bought a plugin. Whoops. Anyways, we've now got a much more robust options menu with all sorts of sliders and graphical options. The menu itself is going to get a visual overhaul since it doesn't match the game's visual style too much at the moment, but having this functionality at all is pretty good. Quick announcement before we wrap things up today, I've got channel memberships now. For $1 a month, you get access to a little badge and some emotes to use on the streams. Pretty much just a simple way to support me, and you get a little bit of something in return. Also, we've got a Discord. When the demo releases, eventually, there will be a speedrun competition, and the submissions will be done through there, so join if you're interested. And from the Discord, you've got this great drawing of Steve's Strike done by Long Patrol. It's been getting a lot of use in there. Anyways, expect devlogs most Fridays, and a stream every Tuesday at 11:30 a.m. EST. Subscribe if you want to see how the game evolves, and thank you for watching.